So let me, there we go, recording in progress. And then there we go. Okay. First up, we have Saul joining us once again from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture for a live stream of an infested part of New Jersey. So I think I'm going to stop sharing and give Saul a chance to say hi and then maybe flip his video depending on how cranky Zoom is being today.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Welcome, Saul. We can hear you. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see the sun is out there.
Yes, its sun is shining brightly. Okay, so I am going to try and flip my camera. Last time I had a problem with this. This time it worked. Okay, so you can see what I'm looking at?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so here we have some adult spotted lanternfly on the side of a tree of heaven. You see some weeping sap there as well. You can see we have quite a few here. Now, these guys are actually down at the base of the tree. I also saw this dead wasp here. I don't know exactly what that's about. Can you see that?
We can see it, but it's not in focus.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, yeah, there
it is. Looks like one of these horntail wasps seems to have died in the process. I don't know what's happening there. This tree root has lanternfly feeding on it, which I thought was interesting. And it's got sooty mold all over it. You see how black that root is? That's an ailanthus tree root there. So that's the infestation here. There's a lot of ailanthus trees at this site. They all have this. There's hundreds of lanternflies all up and down the bark of this tree. And there are several other trees. You see all those brightly lit trees there, they're covered. They're all tree of heaven. This tree here is a tree of heaven. You notice they're all on one side. They're on the sunny side right now. I guess they're warming up for the morning. What else can I show you that's interesting here? I noticed some of them are hanging out on this privet hedge. I think we're at that stage of life where they feed on just about anything. I saw them on some of these brambles as well. So that's the gist of it. You can see some, I don't know if you can see that, the yellow jackets like to come for the honeydew. And if I walk around, I'll probably find you some nice honeydew as well. Here's another tree. Yeah. So I guess while I'm talking, I might as well tell you that New Jersey's now has all 21 counties infested. And we have begun telling the citizens of New Jersey to not report it. So we've been asking them to report for a long time, and now we want to reverse ship. We don't. It's no longer a benefit to us to get reports. So the news press release just went out a couple days ago, telling the citizens of New Jersey, don't bother reporting. And other than that, the only other interesting thing I can tell you is I've been coming to this park since 2018, and this is the first time I've seen tree mortality. The tree that I would consider the most infested in this park has died, and I think it's a combination of spotted lanternfly feeding and some droughty. We've had about a month of drought in this area of New Jersey, and so I think that's what caused the death. So, and you can see the shiny honeydew on these leaves. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know, that's about it. Do you have any questions for me?
That is great, thank you. Are you able to talk at all about like any treatments that are planned or have been done in the area you're in, or what the future plans are now that the whole state is full?
Yeah, I can give you a very brief summary. In New Jersey, we started out trying to eradicate, but being next door to Pennsylvania, we had it coming in from many, many infested counties over lots of bridges, and we quickly became overwhelmed, and we went from trying to eradicate to trying to slow the spread, and that's where we're at now. We have very specific places that we use chemical treatments. We have a team of about 36 people, half of them federal, half of them state, and we all work together. And we basically are working to slow the spread to other states and prevent the spread to other countries. We have an international airport. We have international seaports. We focus on them. We focus on high volume shipping operations, train yards, basically any place that we think it might leave the state. We're certainly not eradicating, and we're certainly not trying to visit every site where people report it. And that's a very common question we get when people report it. They say, okay, so are you going to come out and spray for us now? And the answer is invariably no. New Jersey has 9 million residents, and I bet you most of them have some lanternfly in their yard. So that's the gist of it. We spray dinotefuran, which is a systemic insecticide on tree of heaven, which makes the whole tree toxic to feed upon. And we spray bifenthrin early in the season. You don't want to spray a tree of heaven too early in the season, because bees feed on tree of heaven flowers. They collect pollen and nectar, and you don't want to potentially put a risk to the bees. So we always wait till after flowering of tree of heaven. And we'll use the bifenthrin again in the fall for contact kill, but you got to land it right on the bug, which is a little more challenging because most of them are up high. So you're not getting as much of a kill as you do with the dino. That's the best. And we do still use some hack and squirt with herbicide to kill certain select tree of heaven. And also I would like to mention that the state of New Jersey has a program now too. It used to be only federal in New Jersey, but now the state of New Jersey has a program where they are reimbursing the cost of spotted lanternfly treatments to county governments who choose to participate in the program. So that'll be mostly county lands, probably county parks, places where the public gathers, just to reduce the nuisance pest sort of aspect of it. I'll also throw in that the farmers are dealing with this. We have a lot of wineries in New Jersey, probably 50 of them. And, to different levels, they all have spotted lanternfly now. And we know that it has increased the number of times they have to spray, which increases their costs. You can kill spotted lanternfly with insecticides, it's a bug, but it costs you more because you're spraying more often. They spray, they all die, and they come in from the woods, and it's it can be a real problem for the grape farmers, and also for shipping. Someone like a shipping nursery, the egg masses have to be scraped before you can ship out of state, and that can be a very tedious and time-consuming thing. We have actually assisted our shipping nurseries by sending the spotted lanternfly crew out to scrape egg masses in the winter. We'll be out there. I always say it's like kind of like a dental hygienist cleaning plaque off a tooth. You stand there with a pole scraping away every little piece of schmutz that you see that looks like a spotted lanternfly egg mass. And it's very challenging. And obviously you can only do that with small enough trees that you can reach, but in a nursery setting, usually they are. So that's the overview for New Jersey's spotted lanternfly program.
Thank you. I probably were already running late, but this was just a great question that someone had for you that I feel like we should ask now. Sure. Now that you're telling residents of New Jersey not to report, what are you telling them to do?
So we have a website set up with, it's called www.badbug.nj.gov. But if you Google bad bug, Google wants to change it to bed bug. So you have to make sure you Google bad bug. But you can check out our website, anyone, if you want. And it has a section for homeowner resources. So everyone who contacts us gets pointed to that webpage, to the homeowner resources, where we tell them that if they want to join the battle and beat the bug, as we say, they should scrape egg masses at home. If they choose to, they can apply pesticides or hire someone to apply pesticides. We encourage them to try and control spotted lanternfly on their own properties. But beyond that, it's on the homeowner now. It's not on us to control it in their own properties. And that does, there are a number of people, a percentage of people that really feel like the government should come and do the controlling, but it's just too much. It couldn't be done. So that is the advice we give our homeowners.
Thank you. That's great. I just put that link in the chat for folks to see. Also, I think we've got a few stealth entomologists in our audience today. Someone noted that sometimes the horntail wasps just die with their ovipositors. It's just a failed attempt to lay eggs for whatever reason. It just happens a lot. So
I did not know that. Thank you. That's very interesting. I'm a plant pathologist by training, believe it or not. So anything I've learned about insects has been on the job.
All right. At this point, Saul, we're going to switch over to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, if you want to share your screen. Saul, thank you so much for doing the live stream yet again. We always appreciate seeing the different ways that Lanterfly is impacting different states besides Massachusetts. Saul, if you do want to hang around until the end of the session for the Q&A, we'd love to have you. If you can't stay, I understand. I'm sure you're very busy. Just send me a note in the chat about it. Okay.
Very good. Okay.
All right. Okay, great. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Elizabeth Barnes, who is our new Forest Pest Outreach Coordinator. She is new, but she comes to us with a lot of entomological experience and also outreach experience from her work at Purdue University. So Elizabeth, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure before I start talking. Today, I'm going to tell you about spotted lanternfly biology. And I'm going to start with a really brief overview of the insect. So spotted lanternfly is an invasive sap-sucking insect. They are hemipterans, which are true bugs. They were first introduced into the United States on some crushed stone that was imported into Pennsylvania. And they feed on a lot of different types of coast plants, including tree of heaven, grape, black walnut, rose, hops, and many, many more. So first off, how do you recognize spotted lanternfly? Well, spotted lanternfly looks very different throughout the course of the year. At the beginning of the year, you can see it has this stage where it's black with white spots, and it really stays looking like that all the way from May up until around July. Okay, I'm gonna grab my pointer. Once it reaches July and even into September, it becomes sort of more reddish colored, and it still has those white spots and some black spots as well. And then it reaches the adult stage around July into December, or really the first hard frost of the year. This is probably the stage you recognize a bit more. It lays its eggs, and then those eggs overwinter. So we are here in August right now. This is the point where we usually have some fourth instar nymphs still hanging around, so those little round red insects, as well as some adults. Those are the ones I'm really going to focus on today. The fourth instar nymphs are bright red, and they have some white spots on their body. You can see those white spots here, as well as some black patches. Their overall body shape is sort of rounded. It's really more of an oval, but I would say it's kind of closer to round than it is a full oval. And its head is sticking out from its body. So you can see its head here and its eyes. The legs are also very long. This is not, this is kind of a weird angle for the legs, but they do stick out. They are quite long and distinctive that way. Now, there are a lot of spotted lanternfly lookalikes. I'm just showing you a few today, and I'm going to go over some basic differences between these insects and spotted lanternfly, fourth instar nymphs. The first thing to note, and you can really see it on the box elder bug and the milkweed bug here, is their bodies are much longer. So they're more of a long oval than that roundish shape that you see on the spotted lanternfly. The second thing to look for is the head. So here on all of these bugs, the head is really attached more to the body. So it's more closely connected to the body. I mean, of course, the lanternfly head is attached too, but they don't really stick out from the body in the same way that the lanternfly head does. It all looks like kind of one cohesive shape, whereas here you can see this head is really clearly sticking out. The next thing to look for are the spots. Only the harlequin bug has white spots here that I'm showing you. So you always want to look for those white spots and those black spots on the body of the insect. And then finally, with some of these lookalikes, they'll have much shorter legs than the spotted lanternfly. So here on this milkweed leaf beetle, they're really close into the body, whereas on the lanternfly, they kind of stick out to the side and they're a bit gangly. Next, we're going to look at the adult spotted lanternfly. These insects are gray-brown with spotted wings. They have two sets of wings. The ones that are on top that you're going to be seeing most of the time have black spots on about 2/3 of the wings. And then in the bottom third, it's sort of it almost looks like lacy or a little bit like a snakeskin pattern. Their bodies are also kind of this long triangle shape. So long on these two sides along the body, short on this end. And again, they have those long legs, same as with the nymphs. And the body itself is sort of a blackish blue-gray color, kind of depending on how the light is hitting it. Now, you may be more familiar with seeing images of spotted lanternflies that look like this. This insect has its wings sort of splayed out. You're only really going to see those back sets of wings, so the hind wings, if it's in flight, if it's dead or dying, or occasionally they will flick their wings on trees. The hind wings have a bright red patch. It's really honestly kind of pretty with black spots on it, and then this kind of white swoosh or stripe and a big black patch at the base of the wings. They also sometimes have yellow stripes on the abdomen. Depending on the insect, that's going to be more or less visible. There are also a lot of lookalikes for the adults. Again, this is just a few of the ones that we wanted to highlight that we see a lot. The first lookalike is the giant leopard moth. And this is the one that I would say we probably most commonly see as a lookalike. The giant leopard moths, though, have a white body, whereas the lanternflies have that gray-brown body. They also have spots from the tip of their head all the way down to the base of their wings. Their legs also have white stripes on them, whereas the lanternfly legs are really just black. And they sometimes have this kind of bluish hue to them. Some of the other lookalikes include a couple different moth species with these tiger moths and with the sphinx moths. So you'll usually see stripes on the wings. It almost looks like stained glass rather than spots. With something like this sweetheart underwing. Yes, it does have the red patch on the hind wings, but on the forewings, so the wings on top, there's no spots whatsoever. It's just this sort of mottled brown color. Now, another lookalike that we've been seeing is the tiger bee fly. This insect, there's two things that I tend to look for. First, tiger bee flies are holding their wings out to the side, whereas the spotted lanternfly, most of the time is going to have it covered over their back. The second thing is the wings themselves. Yes, they look sort of spotted, but they really are kind of closer to stripes, which is, part of the name. And so if you see these spots that are all connected in together, that it might be more likely to be the tiger bee fly than the spotted lanternfly, where the spots are really distinctive. They're very much separated from each other. The next lookalike is the fish fly. For this insect, they are much longer than the spotted lanternfly. Some of them will also have these beautiful feathery antennas at the tops of their heads. And their wings, you'll notice, yes, they do have an almost spotted pattern on them, but first, it covers the entire length of the wings and it looks the same throughout. And second, they're not really distinctive spots. They're kind of more splotches along the veins, whereas in spotted lanternfly, the spots are very, very distinctive. And then finally, the cicada, yes, the body shape looks very, very similar to one another. But cicadas in this area, at least, usually are a green or a brown color, and the wings are also transparent. So you can see right through them into the body of the insect. Next, we're going to look at the egg masses. The egg masses are usually a gray-brown putty color, and they are covered with this substance that kind of feels and looks a lot like putty. They will lay them on just about any flat surface as well. Now, sometimes the lanternfly get disturbed before they finish covering the egg. So you can see in these first two, some of the eggs are exposed. These are the little eggs right here. There's this oblong shape, but for the most part, you will see ones that look more like the second two pictures, so the covered or the weathered eggs. Here, it just, again, looks like putty or a splotch of mud on something. And here, some of the eggs are showing through, but you're still seeing that putty covering. And they really will lay them on just about anything. Sometimes they're more obvious than other places. In this first tree, yes, the eggs do stand out, but you can see on the second tree, they're not nearly as obvious. They will also lay them on wood and rocks and metal and outdoor furniture and vehicles and camping equipment. Just about anything they come across, they will try to lay their eggs on. Again, there are a few lookalikes. The egg masses are sometimes most often confused with spongy moth eggs, which are another invasive insect. Two big differences. First, the spotted lanternfly eggs are more of a gray color, whereas the spongy moth eggs are sort of an orangey brown. The second thing is spotted lanternfly eggs have that kind of putty texture, whereas the spongy moth eggs are sort of furry and fuzzy. So those are the two things that I tend to look for when comparing egg masses. Sometimes spotted lanternfly is also confused with praying mantis egg casing. However, with praying mantises, they're almost look more like styrofoam packing peanuts than they are like putty scraped onto something. So they're sort of three-dimensional and foamy rather than looking like they've just been scraped onto the tree. And finally, sometimes people will mix them up with fungus or lichen or other things on a tree. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of those right now. But I will say for the egg masses and really anything else, if you think it might be spotted lanternfly, but you're not sure, please do send in a report. I would rather see a picture of cool fungus than miss a spotted lanternfly egg that's out there. And I will tell you more about how to report later on. All right, so that brings us to our first poll question of the day.
Thank you. All right, give me a second to get my bearings here. All right, so as we mentioned before, this is especially important for anyone looking for pesticide credits or continuing education credits, but we would love to have anybody participate. Quizzes are fun, right? You're not being graded. You just have to answer. You don't have to necessarily get it right to get credits. So our first poll question, which is up on your screen now, is what is the, nope, that is the wrong one. Sorry. Oh, Zoom. Sorry, we're going to try this again. All right, ready, guys? Everybody's awake now, right? All right, that was question number 3. Good to see so many people answering question number 3 correctly without being told what the answer was yet. Let's try this again. All right, spotted lanternflies lay their eggs on which of these choices? Is it trees? Is it rusty metal? Is it chairs? Is it trucks? Or is it all of the above? All right, we have, let's see, 91% participation. So I'm going to leave this open for another few seconds and then we're going to end the poll and show you guys the results. I will tell you, I think a lot of people jumped the gun and got the wrong answer on this one. But like I said, we're just looking for participation. All right, I'm going to run it for another 3 seconds. And there we go. Going to end the poll. Thank you, everybody who responded. Yes, they will lay their eggs on trees, but they will actually lay their eggs, as Elizabeth mentioned, any surface that's outside, any flat surface. So all of the above was the correct answer. All right, Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to move on to talk about the impact of lanternfly on plants. They will shift the host plant that they're using over the course of the year. Right now in August, we'll typically see them on wild grape, tree of heaven, black walnut, river birch, willow, sumac, and red and silver maple, although you are most likely to see them on grape and tree of heaven. And again, they will feed on over 100 different types of plants, so they won't necessarily just stick to these ones. But if you are looking to scout for spotted lanternfly, focusing in on grape or tree of heaven is probably your best bet. Spotted lanternfly feed with a sort of straw-like mouth part that they stick right into the plants. For most plants, if there is heavy feeding, this is going to stress them, but it probably will not outright kill them. You might see a little branch die back, but for the most part, they'll be okay. However, if a secondary stress comes in, something like drought or disease, that's when we really start to worry. This is really ongoing research. Spotted lanternfly is a fairly new invasive pest, so we're still figuring out what the long-term impacts are on most plants. But there are some exceptions to this rule. Tree of heaven saplings and black walnut saplings can both be killed by spotted lanternfly feeding, and you may see a leaf dieback as well there. Tree of heaven, you know, oh well, it's an invasive plant. We don't really mind if the saplings get killed off, but black walnut we would like to keep around in general. Grapes are also really heavily impacted. Saul was mentioning earlier that vineyards have had to really increase their spraying, and that's because spotted lanternfly feeding can kill off grapevines in as little as a single year of feeding. So vineyards have really been hard hit by spotted lanternfly. You can also see things like weeping from trees of sap, and sometimes this like foamy fermented mess at the bottom of the trees. And there is a secondary impact of lanternfly. If any of you have ever had an aphid infestation and you've seen there's kind of like a sticky mess under the tree, that's something called honeydew. Essentially what is happening there is that the insect, in this case the lanternfly, is drinking up more water and sugar than they actually need, and so they pee it out. And then that sugary pee gets all over everything underneath it. Because lanternfly are feeding high up in the trees, that means that it, first off, spreads everywhere underneath that tree. And secondly, if you're standing under it, it feels like this like gross, soft rain of sugar water coming down on you. Stinging insects like bees and wasps love it. This can be an issue not only because, you know, most people don't want more stinging insects flying around them all the time, but also if you have a beehive, the bees really love the honeydew, and they will feed on that, and it changes the flavor of the honey. Also, it can grow sooty mold, which I have some pictures of here. It gets all over the leaves of plants, and there is some concern that that's going to slow photosynthesis and have some bad impacts on the understory. Although that's, again, still something that's being studied. We don't know for sure yet exactly what that's going to look like in the long term, but it does create this awful, smelly mess. If you have any property underneath it, it's hard to wash off. You have to often power wash it to get it off of things. So if you're a homeowner, you have to keep washing it off your deck or washing it off your car. You know, you'd think that sugar water would be easier to clean, but it's really difficult to remove. This is also a big issue for people like fruit growers or anyone who has any sort of business that's outside. You have to try to prevent the lanternfly from being transported from any goods that you're shipping out. You get honeydew all over everything, so you have to clean that. If you are having visitors to, say, you know, pick your own orchard or any sort of outdoor venue, it makes it a lot less pleasant if you have these lanternflies flying around all over the place. So there's the direct impact on the plant health, and then there's this other impact on just people's general well-being. So they are, you know, bad for plants and an overall nuisance. All right, where are they right now? Well, this is not great news either. Now, I do want to note that this map was updated last August 8th, but they're still catching up on some of the more recent finds. For example, you might notice in Massachusetts, there is a county that is colored in with a square. That's because I had to put that in for the Springfield find, and that's the best I could do with PowerPoint. So please forgive me for that. But the key things to notice here are there's this central area around Pennsylvania where the lanternfly has been spreading out from, but there are also all of these isolated populations of lanternfly down here in Indiana and North Carolina. This one in New York is still pretty separated too. And when you look at the individual finds, which I'm going to make a little easier to see here with these red diamonds, you'll notice even more that there are all these disconnected counties. So up in Vermont, in New Hampshire, again, down in North Carolina, way down at the base. And even over in California, they've had some lanternfly get into planes. The planes land in California. Thankfully, as far as we know, they've all been dead when they've landed. But it still shows you how easily these insects are being transported from one area to another by people. A lanternfly is not flying on its own from even this infested site in North Carolina all the way over, hopping a bunch of counties to this find over here. And to be clear, these red diamonds are just individual lanternfly that were found. It's not a population. It might be something like, somebody receives a potted plant from another area and inside there's a dead lanternfly, or a package that has a dead lanternfly in it. If we look a little bit closer at the Massachusetts map, the blue areas are the spots where they were detected. Again, not established, just a single lanternfly was found there, oftentimes dead, but just one lanternfly, whereas the orange are the areas that are infested, or we have found infestations, and that is in Fitchburg, Shrewsbury, and Springfield. I'm not going to go too far into this because Astra will talk more about it later, but I wanted to show you this map a little bit closer for Massachusetts and also highlight that this is our pest dashboard. So if you want to see invasive insects and their maps in Massachusetts, this is the place to go. We also have emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle on there right now, and we plan to expand it in the future. It's still an ongoing process, so if you have any comments, please do feel free to shoot those our way. And you can see the link at the bottom of the screen. Now, how are they getting transported around? Well, there are a few different ways. These are just some of the biggest ways that lanternfly gets transported, but I did want to highlight them for that reason. First, if you have anything that's being kept outside, like furniture, and you move it from one area to a new area, that's going to bring lanternfly with it. You can see if you brought that bench to a new place, there's egg masses on it. Those egg masses are going along for the ride. They can also land on you and get into your car, and then you bring them to a new place. I hope this guy noticed, particularly that one on his neck, but they can be brought around that way. Firewood is another way they're transported. This is another vector for a lot of different invasive insects as well, not just lanternflies. So it's always a good idea to be familiar with the local firewood rules and not move firewood around. Nursery stock, that they can be transported on the plants themselves and also anything that they're contained in. They do their best to inspect them before they get shipped out most of the time, but sometimes things slip through, or they might not realize lanternflies around. There's a million ways that they can kind of slip through the cracks. Also on vehicles, remember those egg masses look like a splotch of mud, and unless you are super meticulous, you might not even notice it on your car. So I suggest if you're in a lanternfly area, check over your car before you leave. If you see something that looks like mud, just gently scrape it off. And if it is mud, hey, your car's a little cleaner. If it's not mud and it is lanternfly eggs, you've just stopped them from being spread even further. And then finally, a lot of lanternfly host plants, particularly things like tree of heaven, will often grow along railroad tracks, and the lanternfly can hop on the train and be transported that way. So just to summarize, some ways that you can help slow the spread of lanternfly: don't move firewood. If you see it, snap a picture and send in a report to us. You don't absolutely need the picture, but it does help us a lot if you can get it. I'd suggest as soon as you see it, try and take a picture, even before you try and get close to it, because they do startle easily. And then after you've got that initial picture, you can, creep closer to get a better picture, or, try and catch it or anything like that. But again, if you don't have a picture, please do still send in a report and note where you are at the time. So that information is key. You can also check before you leave an infested area, and also when you arrive, or when you receive goods from an infested area. And then finally review recommendations for your specific field. I will show you more details on that in a minute. Now, here is where you can report. You can go to our website, which is massnrc.org/pest/SLF. There's a red line on there, some red text. You can just click on that and submit a report that way. Again, if you've got a picture, that's really helpful. If you can note the location and be as specific as possible, that's also really helpful to us. But if you're missing a picture, or if you have to be vague about the location, still send in that report. We do want to hear it. You can also find more details on that same website with some best management practices for many different industries, and also people who are moving. For example, we've got one for nurseries, landscapers, and drivers. Okay, so that brings us to the next poll question.
All right, I double checked to make sure it was actually question 2. So here we go. If you think you've seen a spotted lanternfly in Massachusetts, but you aren't sure, what should you do? 1, take a picture of the bug. 2, take a picture of the bug and share it on Facebook. 3, take a picture of the bug and report it at our pest reporting website, massnrc.org/pests/SLF, or 4th choice, smash it and go about your day. All right, let's see. We've got 75% participation. Answers are rolling in fast. Thank you to everybody. Again, we love these pop quizzes. It's a good way to make sure folks are paying attention, but also a good way to get the message out, in this case, about our pest reporting website. I am going to close it in another 5 seconds. We've got close to 93% participation here, and we're going to end it and share the results. Very happy to see that most of you answered correctly. You should take a picture of the bug if you can get one. Even if you can't, please still do submit a report to our website. I put a link to the webpage into the chat. I'm going to assume that whoever picked smash it and go about your day was just being cheeky, because we definitely are still hoping to get reports from people. Thank you. All right. Back to you, Elizabeth.
So that's what I have for the update, and I will hand things over to Astra now for the Mdar SLF team update.
Awesome. Astra, you want to share your screen?
Yep. Let's see if I can get it to be the right screen. Can you see that?
We can.
Perfect. Okay, so I am the SLF survey lead. I'm just going to give a quick update about what we've been doing this year for our surveys. And first, I'll just go over a brief overview of what we've been doing thus far. So we started our Lanternfly program in 2021, and we installed 50 circle traps across the state last year. They were installed at areas deemed high risk for introduction, heavily trafficked areas, long railroads, around distribution centers. Last year, we installed these circle traps. They're just mesh screens with a bag attached and a lure inside, and supposedly they attract SLF. So we put those out in areas where we really thought, hey, we might get introductions here. This year, we decided to go a slightly different route. We put up sticky traps with screens around them so that larger animals, birds, can't get stuck on the traps, but they can still get anything crawling up or down the tree stuck to them. And this was due to the definite possibility that we would see nymphs appearing at our previously positive sites. Obviously, Lanternfly likes to lay eggs all over the place. They can lay them high or low in the tree. And we wanted to see if we could catch anything crawling down the tree from some of the branches, as well as crawling up the tree. And we put out 112 of these traps, seen here in the purple and blue, all across the state. Again, they're at high risk areas. They're at our previously positive sites. And they're also at places where we got reports last year. We really wanted to make sure we had a good spread across the state. We also had helpful people down in Martha's Vineyard to put out a few traps at a report that we got there last year of some dead lanternfly. And then in orange, you can see where UMass has some traps out as well. And those are mostly for their own research, but we like to include them because they're doing their part to cover the state for us. And so as of our last webinar, Massachusetts had 2 satellite populations of SLF. We're calling them satellite populations because they're not attached to any of the main body that Elizabeth showed you in her presentation down there in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. So these were in Fitchburg and Shrewsbury. And in Fitchburg in August 2021, we got a report of a 4th instar. This is the actual photo that was sent in. And we discovered that there were egg masses, or actually we discovered a population on 2 trees. These are the actual trees. So we found 4th instars, egg masses, and adults on these trees. And we later treated them and then had them removed. But later in the season, as we were doing survey in our quarter-mile delimitation area, we did find egg masses across the same property in the fall after the leaves dropped. It's a lot easier to see when there's no leaves. You can see much more of the trees. And then, so those trees were removed in early spring of 2022. And, you know, we hoped that we could really limit the population there, if not eradicate it altogether. And then in Shrewsbury, oops. In Shrewsbury, why is this here? Sorry, guys. In Shrewsbury, we got a report of some dead SLF, and we decided to check out an area a little ways away after not really seeing anything at the original report. And where we decided to survey, we immediately found egg masses in a small strip of trees along a fence line. It's a very industry heavy area, lots of trucking, so it kind of made sense where we found them. And due to the small area of infestation that we found, we had all the trees along this little fenced strip removed in early spring of 2022. And also with the removals, everything was chipped and then brought to an incinerator to make sure that everything was killed. So along with our trapping this year, we worked with the USDA to create Sentinel trees at the positive areas. And these Sentinel trees are picked based on their proximity to infestations and probability of being selected as a host by SLF. They're usually Ailanthus, as you can see in this picture. After being treated, the tubs are placed under the trees, and these are to collect any insects that feed and die and fall from the foliage onto the ground underneath the tree. And this is for research purposes. We can sort of see how many we've killed. We can, you know, just confirm that there is SLF on that tree if we haven't seen it prior to that. And that helps us with finding new infestations. It will also help us control populations. These are regularly checked. And we did find 4th instars in Fitchburg this July. They're in the same place where we had the egg masses removed. Ailanthus popped up again, sprouted. There are probably a few egg masses that we didn't see on trees that weren't Ailanthus. They're very hard to see. It's not really a surprise. So we do have Sentinel trees on either side of that pocket. It's a very small pocket right now. And there are Sentinel trees on either side. So if these 4th instars mature to adults, hopefully they'll flock to the closest Ailanthus to them, and those are treated, and so hopefully they will die. And so along with the trapping and the sentinel trees, we have also been surveying. We survey at the same areas where we trap, as they're all high-risk areas. We also investigate any reports that we get on our reporting website. So these are invaluable to us because they have led to us finding infestations. You know, Shrewsbury was based on a report. It was a little farther away, but it was because we got the report that we went out there to begin with. And we also investigate trace forwards that we get from anywhere, but including other states. And so those trace forwards this past March led us to find egg masses on nursery stock that were coming in from another state. We alerted the businesses that we thought had them, and we went out to survey. We did find egg masses, quite a few on some of the trees, and they were scraped. At some areas, the trees were quarantined after they were scraped, and then treated a few times over the course of the possible hatch season. And we're happy to report that right now, none of those trace forwards are believed to have led to any kind of infestation. So we think so far, those nurseries and those areas around those nurseries are going to be free and clear of SLF for the time being. And this past couple weeks ago on August 1st, we got a report of a live adult in Springfield. Again, this is the actual picture we received, so it's very helpful if you send in pictures if you think you see SLF. So this is actually a live adult. They were able to smash it, and the person who reported it had actually had a friend in Pennsylvania and had been talking about SLF to them just a few weeks prior to seeing this. So they knew what they were looking at. They knew who to send the photo into, and we went out there right away to survey. And this was in Springfield, so a new county for Massachusetts, Hampden County. Thus far, it has only been in Worcester County. So we have a new infestation in Springfield. We went out to survey and saw that it was just prime location for SLF introduction, lots of industry, lots of areas where transportation could bring it in. It was just rife for the taking for these SLF. We surveyed the first property where the report came from and immediately found 3 life stages. We found old egg masses, adults, 4th instars. It was a sizable population, but you know, as we were surveying, we did sort of a strip of trees, saw them in most of that, saw some in the adjacent property, but it didn't seem to be huge for that first day, but we did suspect that there would probably be more. So finding those 3 life stages, actually, if we find 2, it triggers the full delimitation survey. And on the second day, we went across the street from this original find and discovered that the population was much larger than at our other sites. You know, hundreds of lanternflies all over the trees, lots of ailanthus. This is some sooty mold from right underneath it at in Springfield. It was raining honeydew. There were 4th instar exoskeletons tumbleweeding across the parking lot. So it was a pretty big deal. And as of right now, there are about 42.5 acres infested in Springfield. We're not done surveying. We're trying to delimit the whole population. As you can see, these red dots are positives. The green dots are negatives. So we're hoping that at least along that edge, we have found the boundary of the population. But it's likely that this population is at least a couple years old. SLF, once introduced, can sort of multiply almost exponentially. And with the amount that we found in the heaviest pockets and with how far they've sort of spread around, it's probably at least a couple years old. So our next steps with this are to finish delimiting the area, we have a ways to go on that, but we're hoping that it's contained to within our 1/4 mile delimitation. We are going to branch out to go about 1 kilometer out on either side just to make sure that it hasn't gotten farther than the immediate area that it's in. And then we have plans to assess the area for possible treatment. The treatment would just serve to knock down the current population. I don't think that we're trying to eradicate at this point. It's a sensitive area. There are some wetlands. You know, we don't want to be just spraying willy-nilly to try to get rid of these things. So we can do targeted treatments, target the most highly affected stands of trees, et cetera, to try to keep the population where it is and keep the population as limited as possible. So now we can, and these are some shots from the actual infestation in Springfield. But now we can go to another technician from Mdar who I think has a live feed that she can show us of Springfield.
Actually, we need to do the third poll question first.
Third poll question, sorry. Okay.
Yes. But then you're right. We did kind of save the best for last. We have Monica live in Springfield, and we're going to go to her in just a minute. First, I want to relaunch poll question 3, since I launched that earlier. So it will clear existing polling results. Do I want to continue? If you answered this question before, you need to answer it again. So please do. What is the name of the Massachusetts city with the newest discovery of spotted lanternfly? Is it Shrewsbury, Springfield, Sudbury, or Smallville? And again, just a reminder, if you answered this question when it came up by accident before, please answer it again, especially if you're looking for those pesticide credits. All right, we've got 88% participation. I'm going to leave it up for another second. I know some folks are going to need to leave very close to 11, but you're going to want to stick around to see what Monica's going to be showing us out in Springfield for sure. This is the first time we've really had a significant infestation coinciding with a webinar where you could actually do the live stream. All right, I'm going to end the poll. We have 93% participation. Share the results. We caught a few people with the Shrewsbury answer, but the real answer is, of course, Springfield, as Astra was just describing for you. Okay. Elizabeth, I know you had like an intro ready, but maybe we'll just go right to Monica if that's okay. Monica, do you want to share your screen? This is Monica Koski. She is one of our spotted lanternfly survey tech folks that's been working with the program for at least a year, I think, right, Astra?
Yes, almost exactly a year.
Almost exactly a year. Feels like longer.
It does.
But Monica, please say.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, but it is that I think your screen sharing is not working right for some reason that I don't really understand. It's showing a message that says you are sharing screen, but it's not actually sharing your screen. So maybe try like ending and starting the share again. I don't know.
Okay.
There we go. That's perfect.
You can see everything?
Yes, we can. You are in the weeds,
great.
Literally in the weeds.
Yes. I wanted to start off by showing you this tree here. The lanternflies have been feeding on it so heavily that some of the foliage has fallen off the top. And I'm going to move in closer so you guys can get a better look at how many are really on this tree. We've seen fourth instars crawling up and down. If you can see looking up, all those little black dots, there's lanternfly all the way up. I'll bring it down to get a closer look at these guys. And let me see if I can find some fourth instars for you. There's more adults.
This, of course, looks both cool and terrible. So thank you. It's a lot of lanternflies on that tree.
Yes, there are. Over here, there's some fourths. on this new growth down the bottom. Can you see them?
I'm seeing adults and not instars right now. They might just be too
They
far
like to
in.
crawl away.
Oh, there they are. Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. And just below this area, I don't know if you can see in the video, but the leaves of the new growth down at the base of the tree are all shiny with the honeydew. And there's even an adult hanging out over here. And the sumac at the base of the tree is just covered in sooty mold.
Wow, that's almost black.
Yeah. And I've noticed this for the first time today. There at the base of the trunk, there is some of that white frothiness that Elizabeth mentioned in her presentation.
Oh yeah, look at that. Cool.
You can see that there. And they're just everywhere. There are more defoliated trees in the area as well. And they love this spot. There's grape and bittersweet vines everywhere. So they're happy bugs.
All right, awesome. Well, not awesome. I always say awesome. I really appreciate you doing this feed so that we can show everybody what's like actually going on in Springfield. I can see a lot of questions coming into the Q&A. The natural question people have is, where exactly is this in Springfield? I mean, we're deliberately avoiding sharing the exact location because we don't want people in the area disturbing the infestation, and also we're just trying to protect the businesses from the attention. And so we don't release the exact address, but thank you, Monica, for sharing that feed. I think maybe, hopefully, Monica, you can stick around too for the Q&A.
Sure.
Okay, great. I almost want to have you keep sharing your screen, but I think I'm going to switch over to the last few slides we have. So thank you again very much for that.
Of course.
We're going to conclude this part of the webinar and move on to the Q&A. Just again, if you need to report spotted lanternfly, we are still asking that folks report it. If they see it in Massachusetts, please bookmark massnrc.org/pests with an S/SLF. That is the place to go to look in case we have an update to our reporting protocol, and you don't need to report it in a certain area anymore. This is where we would put that information. I'm just trying to get my slides if it's there. If you missed all or part of this webinar, or better yet, if you want to share this or past spotted lanternfly webinars with your coworkers, friends, and family, we have everything archived on our YouTube channel. You can go to bit.ly/Mdar YouTube and see all of our past webinars there. This URL, of course, sorry, this webinar right now will be posted in about a week or so, depending on how busy we are out in Springfield. And then again, we have another quarterly update coming up on November 16th. If you registered for this webinar, or if you have a pesticide applicator's license, you will receive an email notification and an invitation to register for that event when we're a little bit closer to the date. If you are looking for those free pesticide credits, you can get them for every one of these sessions, even though we do cover a bit of the same information. So don't worry about that if you have any concerns. And then I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen and move on to the Q&A. So we got a lot of great questions in the Q&A. One of them that I thought it would be good to pick right away is someone was asking what a trace forward was, and I realized that that might be us getting into our vocabulary and not defining it. So Astra, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Trace forwards are like, we'll get a report from a different state, and we'll, oh, Jen, I don't know if I'm going to do a good job of of explaining this. Basically, we get a report and we figure out, like, from some business that had SLF egg masses, who they did business with and pushed stock forward to. So it's basically just like following the chain of where things have gone. So, you know, we got this report from another state of nursery stock coming up. We figured out who the broker was and who they sell to, and then we were able to figure out what businesses we needed to go to. So it's just us tracing the steps forward to where things have ended up.
That works. Of course, I threw you under the bus and now I'm gonna act like I would have defined it any better. We also have trace backwards. So like if somebody, for example, bought a tree at a nursery and found Lanterfly on it, then we would go back, we would say, where did you buy it? And then we would trace it backwards to that nursery. And then we might have to say, well, where did this nursery get the shipment from, and go to another state or something like that. And I mean, that can apply to things outside of the nursery industry. It's just a trace of a path of a pest or pathogen. So thank you. There was another question early on from Stacy. Oh, right. So what happens to infested trees once they're removed? I think I'm going to throw this one to Astra too.
So we have them chipped on site to a certain size that is, research says that they can't survive, the egg masses won't be viable under that size. And then we've actually been lucky enough to take all those chips to an incinerator and just have everything incinerated, so we can be 100% sure that what we have removed, it does not get spread anywhere. It's just 100% destroyed.
Okay, great. So someone had asked if there were, well, are you trapping in cities bordering Springfield? I don't know. Yeah, they must have asked this after you showed the map. Did you show a map where all your traps are, Astra?
I did, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, as you can see, we are actively trapping all over the state, not just in and around Springfield, but any place that's considered a high risk area.
Yeah, and I will say, we put the traps out in the spring, so we're trying to get them out before, there's really activity with the live life stages, and we just pick based on what we deem as high risk, which we have different metrics for, but we try to get them out before there's going to be live life stages. And we already had things in Springfield and around Springfield, but we try to hit the urban areas pretty hard because that's where Atlantis is going to be most prevalent.
Okay, great. There are a few questions came in. Maybe I'll throw this to Elizabeth. Can you describe again what you mean when you talk about honeydew?
Sure. So it's basically insect pee. So it's a sugar water that the spotted lanternfly pee out. They actually kind of like shoot it out in these little bursts. It's really weird to look at, but it gets on a kind of coating on everything underneath the plants, and it's just that the sugar and water that then dries on the plants underneath. Any sort of vehicles, property, anything that's underneath where the lanternfly is, the honeydew gets on it. So it's sugar water that gets everywhere. And of course, then things like stinging insects really like it because they love sugar water. If you've had a hummingbird feeder, you may be familiar with that. And sooty mold grows on it, which is black and gross and just generally unpleasant.
Thank you. Somebody also asked, hold on, I'm putting a link to our YouTube channel into the chat. Thank you, Anna, for reminding me to do that. Somebody also asked, does the transfer from honeybee to honey when feeding on honeydew change the flavor noticeably? Somebody actually made a run of honey called Doom Bloom out in Pennsylvania that was supposedly mainly honey made from bees that were feeding on spotted lanternfly honeydew. And it's a bit funky in its taste and smell. we managed to acquire some samples. It's very weird. It still tastes like honey, but it's definitely dark and a bit odd.
It's kind of fun as like a, you know, novelty, but it's one of those things where I think if you were ending up with honey that tasted like that year after year, you just want your normal honey after a while.
Yeah. Okay, so we are at, I just want to do a time check. We're at 11:09 now. We said we'd go till 11:15. If you need to leave and you've been here since 10, you will get your pesticide credits, but we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and assuming that my panelists can stay, I want to keep taking some more questions. So hopefully Astra and Monica, okay, good, Elizabeth's here. Hopefully Astra, you can stay, and Monica too.
Yep.
So there were a couple questions about like what to do when you scrape egg masses. Like, do you just scrape and is it fine? Can you just throw it away? Personally, I have seen people like scraping it into rubbing alcohol to kill the egg masses. I'm not so sure about the like long-term feasibility of scraping individual egg masses off. Astra, I feel like I've seen you smashing it, so maybe I'll hand this one over to you.
I like to do what I call the squish and scrape. You take whatever instrument you're using to scrape and you like pound it against the egg mass so that all of the eggs are actually like squished, and then you scrape everything off. You want to make sure there's like a popping and possibly liquid coming out when they're really ready to hatch, because you'll know that you've completely destroyed the eggs, and then you can just scrape everything off. They're not really viable once they come off the tree, especially if you've already squished them.
All right, here's one of the tough questions. It's sort of a two-part. People are asking what, you know, whether we're going to be doing treatments in Springfield, but then someone was also asking, like, if this was ID'd, you know, if we've known about this for 2 weeks, why are there still living insects out at the site? I mean, I think I'll start, and then Astra, you can kind of finish off if I don't answer it right. I mean, first of all, we're looking into the possibility of doing chemical treatments similar to what they've been doing in other states to knock back the population in Springfield, but it's more important at this point to figure out where the insects are, and that's where all of our resources have been going right now, into what we call delimiting the infestation. Like, the survey crews are out there every day figuring out the size of the infestation so that we can determine what our next best steps are. In terms of like, why aren't we destroying them? It's if you see one insect and you can smash it and you think that you've done your job, there are dozens of other insects in the like upper canopy of the tree way higher than you can reach, and if you try to kill them by smashing them, they often hop away, so your success rate is going to be less than 100%, and it can cause them to disperse further away if you really disturb the infestation. So to me, I mean, we know that just like crushing all the insects you can find isn't enough to eradicate this pest. They haven't been able to do that in other states. We know what works. What works is surveying, monitoring, some trapping, and pesticide treatments. So that's, you know, what we're probably looking towards. How did I do, Astra?
Good. I mean, you can't just go out there and spray 42 acres with pesticide. Like, first of all, we don't have the equipment or the money to do like a flyover spray. And secondly, like, you wouldn't just do that in like a large area. There's other environmental assessments that have to take place before you can do something like that. We are hoping to get some treatments done as quickly as we can. Like I said, we would focus on the largest populations. So there are heavier pockets and lesser pockets in that area of infestation. We could do, you know, injection treatments of just the trees that have the base populations with dinotefuran, but, you know, we need to do environmental assessments first. And I also just want to address, someone asked if in large infestations, it's safe to burn the infestation to effectively kill them. I mean, it's not really safe to burn a whole area of woods, or really anything, even if you just had like one tree, you know, if it's in a woodlot, it's not safe to use fire for stuff like that.
Yeah, I was literally about to choose that one next to address.
Especially in
we're
this
not going out
drought.
there with flamethrowers, you know.
Thank you, Monica. We are in a drought. We are in a severe drought in a lot of Massachusetts. Please do not start setting anything on fire outdoors right now or ever. Kill it with fire is just not the way to eliminate any pest insect. We had a couple of people ask about conifers, including someone with a Christmas tree farm. Conifers are not, I mean, conifers could have egg masses on them, and folks with Christmas tree farms should be checking for egg masses on trees, but there's no known, I don't know, is there, I don't know of any impact to the tree health on conifers.
No, as far as I know, they don't really feed on them. I think it's the sap that creates an issue for them. It's so sticky. It's the same thing with milkweed, where they will sometimes try and feed on milkweed, but it doesn't work out for them because of the latex. So there are some plants that you might find egg masses on them, but the insects aren't going to be able to actually feed on it, and so that won't be an issue. The only other thing I can think of is the sooty mold. If there are nearby trees with lanternfly, you might get some of the honeydew on it if it like was set up in the right way or it got blown in the wind, but you're probably not going to see effects otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good point. I figure on most Christmas tree farms, the area with the trees are going to be pretty open, but it could be, you could see some, you know, adjacent damage. Oh, that's a good point. Okay. We do know that the USDA is working on potential biocontrols, but it's still in the very early research phases. So thank you for that question, but we don't have too much details on that right now. Elizabeth, do you want to take this one? Does anything eat spotted lanternfly?
Well, yes. We've got lots of pictures of, you know, birds trying to eat it, spiders, praying mantises, things like that, but they're not really focusing in on just eating the lanternfly. They are generalist feeders, which means they eat lots and lots of different things. So they're not going to actually control the population of lanternfly. Like a bird might eat a few lanternfly, but it's not going to be enough to really, you know, knock down that population, which is what I suspect people are hoping when they ask if things eat them. So yeah, you might see some birds, like I said, some other things that eat lots of different types of insects eating lanternfly, but it doesn't really help that much.
Okay, thank you. Somebody did ask, you know, can pets get sick or spread a sickness from eating them? First of all, they can't, there's no sickness to spread. There was some sort of urban legend stuff going around a year or so ago that dogs were going to eat spotted lanternflies in heavily infested areas and get really sick. The reality is that they won't. I mean, you know your pet better than we do. Some pets taste test things, and that could cause an issue. And if you're ever concerned, you should always talk to your vet. But in general, they're not going to be eating large amounts of lanternflies because they're quite distasteful. And there's no known like poison effect or toxicity effect to animals. Any more than, you know, your dog eating a large amount of anything that they shouldn't be eating could be a health issue, you know? So I don't really think that's something that folks need to worry about for their pets. I hope that answers that question. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask and doing it poorly. All right, okay, this is a good one for Astra. Have the traps caught any spotted lanternfly?
So this year we haven't caught anything in our traps. The only places where we really expected that we might were in Fitchburg and Shrewsbury, and we did do the removals. So we try to place the traps on Ailanthus if we can. And right now the closest Ailanthus to like the Fitchburg infestation is a little ways away, and it's also been treated as a sentinel tree. So if they do feed on it, they might die and not crawl into the trap. But we did catch them in Fitchburg. When we first got the report, we put a trap out, and we did eventually catch some 4th instars and young adults in those traps. And then we put some sticky bands onto the same trees, and those caught a few more. But the traps, they're good in infested areas as a like way of some mitigation. We can put them up and, you know, as many as get caught in the traps die. So that's like sort of a way of controlling a little bit of the population. But for the most part, we just put them out as a monitoring system. And even though we put them in high risk areas, we didn't really expect to find anything except perhaps on Fitchburg and Shrewsbury traps, and we haven't this year.
All right, and this is another good question that comes up a lot. Would removing Tree of Heaven stands before they become infested help with decreasing the spread of spotted lanternfly? I will start by saying this is something that we're struggling with. I think at this point, I would say, you know, if you're able to remove Ailanthus or Tree of Heaven, then it would be good to remove it, but it is an incredibly challenging invasive species to eradicate from an area. And I think a lot of people are not going to be able to do it either because of the cost of it or just because of the location of it. Trying to eradicate Tree of Heaven from an area without herbicide use is almost impossible. And in some areas, people either won't want to or won't be able to use herbicide because they're in a wetland resource area. So it can be challenging. And some of the things that I've seen that really kind of concern me is that, you know, in some of the places in other states where they've done Tree of Heaven removals, you know, you remove the large trees and then you get like a lawn of tiny Tree of Heaven suckers from the root base, and that can make it much harder to control spotted lanternfly. So I think that that's one tool in the tool belt, but we're not going to be doing anything like that on a wide scale. Anybody have any follow-up to that? Astra's nodding, so that makes me feel good about my answer.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the means and you're in an area where it's not going to affect anything else by doing an herbicide treatment, then, you know, by all means, if you're worried about other things on your property, you can try it. But if you're like, I don't know, if you're up in like Haverhill or somewhere and you have Tree of Heaven and you're not really close to a population, I wouldn't worry about it right this second because it's not going to be cost effective for you.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say the other thing is, I know when it first showed up, some people may have heard that we were hoping it needed Tree of Heaven to survive, and we've since found that it doesn't. It can do fine without Tree of Heaven, so it's not going to help from that standpoint either. They'll be able to eat other things besides Tree of Heaven, even if there's no Tree of Heaven there.
We had another question about the drought kind of early on, like how we're expecting spotted lanternfly populations to react. I don't think they're going to have any problem surviving the drought. They're going to possibly have more limited plants to feed off of, but I don't think it's going to have any long-term impacts to them. Somebody asked if spotted lanternfly could crossbreed with other bugs. Not to our knowledge. Just kind of going through the last few questions here before we end. I do want to end by by 11:30 at the latest, just because we got folks that need to get out into the field. Any advice for a state that has not had a confirmed established infestation yet, i.e. recommended strategies for keeping it out? People can contradict me. My opinion is that you're not going to be able to keep it out. And the important thing is to find it early and report it so that you can hopefully either eradicate it if it's a very tiny satellite population, or at least slow the spread of it. But given that this pest is an excellent hitchhiker that has known associations with transportation, railways, trucking industry, and many other pathways in and out of the states, the only way to keep it out would be to keep everybody and everything out of your state, and that's not going to happen. It's not realistic. So you just kind of have to expect it and prepare for it. Please, anyone that wants to follow up with that, take it away.
I mean, you guys also spent a lot of time making best management practice lists for different industries. I think those are really helpful, like getting in touch early with affected industries like your nurseries, your sellers of like poinsettia and things like that, and hardy mums in the fall. We've had like dead SLF come in on those in the past, and like pumpkins. If you know stuff is coming from an infested state, just get in touch with the industries that are probably going to be most affected and like give them checklists of things to look for, so that they'll know what to report like when inevitably they get something.
That's true. I mean, chances are whatever state the person is asking the question from has or is prepping things. I threw a link to our best management practice list into the chat. It's just on our main SLF page. If people want to check that out, we're always willing to share that with folks that want to adapt it. We have best management practices for the nursery and landscape industry, for the moving industry, so like the moving trucks and U-Hauls and things like that, for businesses in infested areas, for beekeepers, and folks like that. And someone else asked, I mean, we are working the best we can with the transportation industry. The federal government has been doing a really good job of reaching out to railways to kind of get cooperation from them about, when we need to do surveys and potentially treatments in infested areas that are on railway property. So we are reaching out to groups like that. We had a couple questions about, pesticide options. We are still working to develop a list of recommended treatment options for folks that want to treat. In Massachusetts, we're still in the beginning stages of the infestation. And so we don't have a lot of like homeowners that are looking to treat because there aren't any known infestations in residential areas at this time. So we'll probably have a list like that by the next webinar, for folks that are looking for certain products. And I don't know of any 25B sprays or that are recommended for working with lanternfly. I know you can use horticultural oil on the egg masses, but that is, iffy at best, depending on whether you do the treatment at the right time. Someone was asking, I don't actually know the answer to this. So once they feed on a treated tree, how long before lanternfly dies? I don't remember this. I mean, if it's a contact kill, like bifenthrin, then it's going to be pretty immediate. If it's a systemic treatment where they're injecting a pesticide, then it takes time to, I don't know, depends on the time of year and how the sap is running. So at the end of the season, it could take maybe a few days longer for the pesticide to be spread throughout the entire conductive system of the tree, but otherwise it should just be within a few days if you do a treatment. Not entirely sure about that. All right, I'm going to how about we pick one more question. Astor, you've been looking. Is there one you want to pick on the list to answer, and then we'll have to go?
I mean, no, not anything Oh,
right.
someone asked, are we gonna institute an SLF certification for landscapers, movers, similar to the ALB certification?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, at first when I saw that question come in, I kind of thought it was maybe about the whole notice of abatement, but I don't think that's what they're asking. I think they're saying, like, is there a training where you say you're ALB certified? Like, we don't, the ALB, the Asian Longhorn Beetle compliance training certification program works because they have a quarantined area. So we are working directly with property owners to train them and provide them with things like checklists for their vehicles and things they should be checking on their property to keep them from spreading spotted lanternfly further. So I guess that sort of we are, but we don't, as of right now, have any quarantine in place. So it's a little more complicated, but yeah, we are working directly with properties that are within infested areas to ensure that they're not, they're receiving notification from us that they're in an infested area and being asked to take a training similar to the ALB compliance training. So I guess the answer is yes. All right, I think unless any of the panelists have anything else to add, that we're gonna end this. Thank you everybody for sticking around. We had about half of folks stick around to the end. Great questions today. Thank you to all of our panelists, especially, well, Saul has left us already. We really appreciate Saul coming on, and thank you, Monica, for being out there on site today to show us what's going on in Springfield. Thank you everybody for attending. As I said, we have another webinar coming up in November, and this will be archived on our YouTube channel within the next week or so. Thank you for joining us. Everybody have a good day.